podcast. I'm your host, Mari Reesberg. Over the past several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Alan Lazaros, business coach, CEO of Next Level University, and podcaster. Please enjoy Alan Lazaros. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I'm here with Alan Lazaros, business coach, CEO of Next Level University, podcaster, and so much more. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. I do not take it lightly. I say this every time I ever get the opportunity to go on a podcast and speak into the lives of others. I started listening to podcasts 9 years ago, and they really helped me reorient and reshape my life after a tough car accident that I had. And so I don't take it lightly. So if you're hearing me right now, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for your attention, because I think that really is the most important thing in the world, is what you pay attention to. So I don't take that lightly. Hopefully I don't disappoint.
No, already above and beyond. I love it. Well, welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you here to chat about creativity and kind of the bridging between the creative world and the business world, and how you support people and your own experience of creativity. But before we dive into that, why don't you take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
All right. So I have a long version. We'll try to do the shorter version. Keep in mind, I'm trying to condense 35 years into just a couple minutes here. So that will be a challenge. So started off definitely with adversity. And again, the other piece of this that's really important is I didn't understand any of this at the time. You and I were talking in the pre-call that I started doing therapy in my 30s and sort of rewatching the movie of my life. And now I kind of am starting to get it. Whereas at the time I was just going through it, growing through it, figuring it out. So when I was 2 years old, my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28 years old. I had a stepfather from age 3 to 14. So my real last name is actually McCorkle. My birth father is John McCorkle, big Irish Catholic family. It was Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette. So my mom and pop they had 6 children, all J.
Wow.
Father passed away. Mom was stay-at-home mom at 31, had an older sister that was 6, and I was 2. Stepfather comes into the picture from age 3 to 14. His name was Steve Lazaros. So my last name's Lazaros. A lot of people that are Greek, they look at me and they go, Lazaros? Because I'm blonde hair, blue eye, not a hair on me, right?
Yeah.
So anyways, real last name is McCorkle, stepfather, Steve Lazaros, from 3 to 14. When I was 14, and when we were the Lazaroses, we weren't really associating much with the McCorkles because we were trying to be the Lazaroses, so to speak. So I kind of didn't associate with the McCorkles much, unfortunately. 14 hits, stepfather leaves, takes his entire extended family with him. As well as 90% of the income. He gets the apartment building and the yacht. We get the house and the dog. So back from 3 to 14, we were definitely upper middle class, .com bubble US, did very well. Late 90s, early 2000s, particularly in the 90s, everyone was doing very well economically. So I went from, ski trips and motorcycles and trucks and snowmobiles, and we had a yacht and deep sea fishing. We went from that to basically I get free lunch at school now because our income is so low. Went from I can't wait to get into college and become an engineer to I don't even know how I'm going to go to college now, because the college I want to go to is $50,000 a year, and this is back then, and I don't have any money. So I did the only thing. Now that same year, 14 is hardest year of my life. Didn't know that at the time. Same year that my stepdad left and took his entire extended family with him, still haven't seen a single one of them since.
Wow.
The same year, my sister moves out with her older boyfriend. Same year, my mom gets in a fight with her sister, my Aunt Sandy, and then she ostracizes us from her side of the family. So by the time I'm 14 years old, again, did not get this until my 30s. When I
Sure.
started doing therapy, I kind of lost 3 families by the time I'm 14.
Yeah.
Whoa. So didn't handle that, didn't process that, didn't grieve through that, didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
So my solution to that, quote unquote, was aim higher, work harder, get smarter.
Mm.
So there's 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I did fawn socially. I would consider myself quite the social coward,
Mm-hmm.
although lately I'm turning that around. And then fight behind the scenes, aim higher, work harder, get smarter. Because when my stepdad left, it was there's no future trust fund, there's no safety net. This is my mom doesn't have a real career.
Mm-hmm.
Neither does my sister. Like, I'm man of the house by 14 years old. How am I going to provide? And
Yeah.
so I did. I got straight A's through all of high school. I got into my dream college. I got tons of financial aid and scholarships, so I got to go. I got
Mm-hmm.
my computer engineering degree. I got my master's in business, and then I was off to the races in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Rose in corporate very quickly. 21st century computer engineering with an MBA, bunch of different tech companies: iRobot, Sensata Technologies, Lens Americas, Oz Development, all these different tech companies.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually landed at a company called Cognex. They sell industrial automation equipment into manufacturing facilities all across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I managed my own territory in New England. It was Vermont, Western Massachusetts, Connecticut. Fast forward, I get in my own car accident. I'm trying to make this as short as I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I get in a car accident. I'm 26. And at this point, I'm with my little cousin. We weren't drinking or partying or anything like that. This is the one person who actually came back from my mother's side. My cousin Jeff, and then my second cousin, his son Dan. So he's 17. I'm 26. We're going to TGI Fridays. I end up on the wrong side of the road, dark winter night. I'm supposed to yield. I don't. My fault. Cross the double yellows, look up, and it's the brightest lights I'd ever seen. I thought it was a Mack truck. 2 things saved my life. Number one, it was not a Mack truck. It was a lift kitted pickup truck. There's lots of those up in New Hampshire.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I was driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat that I bought in $5,000 cash, because to me, money was the solution to my problems. So I just bought, I all through high school and college, I was broke. So I just bought a really cheap car, even though I made a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Volkswagen, thank you, because I used to call this the tank. German engineered steel trap of a car. The entire hood was completely smashed in, but the frame wasn't at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I've since researched it. It's one of the safest cars ever built, which is wild.
Yeah.
So thank you, Volkswagen, because if I was in a little Honda Civic, no question, that would be the end. So I'm 26 at the time, paid off $84,000 worth of debt in a single year, top 1% earner. I'm almost at $200,000 a year in corporate, tech company, all that stuff. Successful, but deeply unfulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know that. After my car accident, this was the second chance my dad never got.
Mm.
So my little cousin, we were both physically okay, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, I was completely rattled. He was already tweeting about it, sort of like 17, I'm invincible mentality. For me, I'm 26. My dad died at 28 in a car accident. I've seen pictures of his car.
Yeah.
And the pictures of my car don't look very different. So I just had to reevaluate. This was my quarter life existential crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I reevaluated everything. And so now I break it down into these 4. I'll go super fast. I think there's 4 buckets in life that we all try to go through. And for your creative endeavors, anyone out there watching or listening, the first bucket is you're unfulfilled and unsuccessful. We all kind of start there. When I was a cart kid and a busboy in my teens, I was unfulfilled and unsuccessful. Then I went to successful, but still unfulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
After my car accident, I actually flipped the script. I got really fulfilled, really clear on who I am, really aligned, fit, happy, healthy, productive, but I went broke.
Mm-hmm.
So now I was unsuccessful, but deeply fulfilled. And then now I'm finally 9 years later, finally capable of saying over the last couple of years that I'm both successful and fulfilled. And that's really, I think, the bucket we all want to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't authentically say, I want my future to be an amplified version of what my life already is, then you're probably not in that 4th bucket yet. And that's what I help people with now. So people hear business coach, but really what it comes down to, honestly, is helping you become successful and fulfilled. Because in all honesty, one or the other is actually pretty easy, in my opinion. Having both is ridiculously difficult.
Yeah, there's so much creativity that goes into kind of combining or interweaving those two together.
100%. And they seem very opposing depending on, so for example, what's most profitable is rarely what's most fulfilling.
Sure.
And so that's the problem. You either go for profitability and you win in the economy, but you're deeply unfulfilled, or you go for what you're passionate about, but the ability to monetize that is not always nearly as easy, right? So if you want to dance on Broadway, for example, yeah, that can be really lucrative, but only for the top 1% of 1% of 1% of 1%, right? So that's, I think, the real life challenge. And that's what I do now. And we can talk about how creativity weaves into that. But essentially, that's my goal now, is to help people become both successful and fulfilled, because I've definitely been on either ends of that spectrum where I had one and not the other. And it really isn't, it isn't great on either end, I'll be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love you're coming to that realization or connection around being able to find fulfillment and success in the things that you do. And I'm curious, for you, when you think about creativity, what does it mean to you to be creative?
You know, I was telling you before this that this would be outside my comfort zone. And the reason why is because as a computer engineer, there's 4 modalities of thinking, and one of them is numbers and mathematics. One of them is energy, which the numbers and mathematics is, I think, the rarest. Energy is the next rarest. And then the big ones that most people are is words and concepts. Most people think in words and concepts in conversation. And then there's images and pictures. So I'm numbers and statistics and mathematics. And so when you say the word creative, I've never personally identified as super creative, but I know that I am creative. I mean, whether it's podcasting, coaching, speaking, training, I am creative, but this is outside my comfort zone because I don't identify as a creative really. But what I do identify with in your show, which I've listened to, sustaining creativity.
Yeah.
I'm really good at the sustaining part.
Nice.
And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with. And I was telling you, my coaching roster right now is 24 people, youngest 16, oldest 63. And I'm helping them sustain their creative endeavors and monetize them in a way that's valuable in the global economy. And so, what does creativity mean to me? It means turning your passion into purpose, into profit. And rather than some bumper sticker phrase, it means finding out what you're obsessed with. Find out what you're obsessed with, and then use that obsession to serve others, which is passion into purpose, and then serve others for a profit. And that doesn't mean right away, but it means over time, that's what you can do. And if you can do that, consider yourself very, very fortunate, because a lot of us are obsessed with things that are very, very difficult to sustain a career with.
Absolutely. I love all of it. And I love when people come on and say, well, creativity, not totally my wheelhouse. Because as you're talking, all I can think of is, if you're a numbers person and statistics, all you pay attention to is patterns. And that's how creativity is, and connecting dots and connecting different things. So I love hearing this from guests when they talk about creativity, and seeing how literally in everything we do, we can find creative connections, creative patterns, repetition. Like that is creative.
You know, it's a growth opportunity for me, because if you don't identify as something, you're not going to unconsciously and subconsciously double down on it.
Right.
So how much has that held me back that I don't consider myself creative? That's the question that's going through my mind right now, because
that's a great question.
I consider myself an engineer. I consider myself disciplined. I consider myself structured. I consider myself extremely focused, but I don't consider myself super creative. But we've created a ton of frameworks at Next Level University, and we're creating a little booklet of all the frameworks that we've created, and all of those are created. So it's just weird how, the other piece of this too, and I think for you, this was probably the opposite, but I was told when I was a kid, you're really good at math. You're not really as good at reading and writing. And so you pigeonhole yourself. Well, I'm good at math, so let me do more math. And then you get better at math, and then that reinforces the identity.
Sure.
And so you start to identify, like I identify as science, technology, engineering, mathematics, business, and finance. But those aren't creative, quote unquote, right? And so That I think is a huge bottleneck that I've just illuminated today. It's good.
I love the real-time light bulbs that are going off
Yeah.
as we're talking.
Yeah.
That's the beauty.
Where has that held me back? That's what my brain is doing. That's why I just wanted to own it too and just say that I'm outside my comfort zone, because
Yeah.
who knew I'd be on a
A creativity
sustaining
podcast.
creativity podcast with
Yes.
with someone in performing arts, you know?
Right? It's the
Cool.
best. It's so fun to have people who don't identify as creatives, who get to reevaluate and rethink what it means to be a creative, and how, looking back at your life, you recognize, oh, there were so many moments where creativity helped me solve a problem, helped me rearrange something in my life or in my world, gave me a different perspective. So it's always fun. But I'm so curious, being in this world of business and computer science and finance and numbers, when you experience challenges, how do you face these challenges? If you think about it from a creative perspective, like, are you someone who teases everything apart? Do you look at big picture, or do you kind of jump in and tackle something? What's that strategy for you?
Yeah, so it's super contemplative and analytical.
Hmm.
So what would be a good example of this? Uh, Kevin and I were just talking earlier. You had Kevin on your podcast a couple of years ago. Kevin's my
Yeah.
business partner, and we were talking earlier about the next 12 months, and he and his wife Taryn are trying to get a home, and we're trying to get another home. And that's our goal, right? And so when you set a goal, you have to get creative. And again, this isn't necessarily my inner dialogue. This is me, brand new sort of software upgrade. You got to get creative. That's
Yeah.
not what I would have said this morning when we were talking. So we're masterminding and strategizing. That's what I would call it. We were
Yeah.
strategizing about
Mm-hmm.
how to do it. And so we came up with some good ideas today that we're going to. So, for one of the things that we're doing differently is, when you look back at the last 7 years of us podcasting, one of the things that has indirectly led to the most success at NLU is just meeting listeners for free,
Mm-hmm.
jumping on Zoom with listeners and just meeting them. And then they end up doing group coaching, and they end up coming to our meetups and book club, and then they end up one-on-one clients. So it's okay. Well, if this is revenue downstream and these are all the things upstream that brought that revenue, let's get creative about how to meet more listeners.
Yeah.
And so that's new verbiage though, because in my head it was, let's strategize about how to meet new listeners. But
Right.
getting creative is exactly what we're doing, because at the end of every episode we plug something.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been talking lately about subscribe, hit like, subscribe, or comment, or rate us, give us a review. And
Mm-hmm.
I said, dude, we should try to meet our listeners more, because in hindsight, that was the most valuable thing. And
Mm-hmm.
he and I just strategized, got creative about how we're going to articulate, because I think I'm pretty intimidating for a lot of our listeners.
Mm-hmm.
They don't necessarily identify as engineers or achievers, and I'm an engineering achiever. So I
Sure.
think I'm trying to bridge that gap and be more warm and welcoming and loving.
Yeah.
And that's the feedback I've gotten, is that I'm really intimidating. So whatever. But anyways, so how do I lower the intimidation factor and make it feel more warm and welcoming? And even if nothing comes of it,
Yeah.
I just still get to meet our listeners, which helps tremendously, because I learn from them, they learn from me, and then we know our listeners better. So now we know who we're talking to. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a win-win-win-win-win. And yeah, I guess we got creative about how to do that.
Yeah. I love the new language. I mean, that's a creative experience, and the system upgrade, as you said, for yourself
Yeah.
in that process.
Is
Yeah,
that the
but
verbiage you would use?
it is. I mean,
System
yeah,
upgrade.
system upgrade, or like, I don't know, maybe. Why
Marie
not?
3.6.
Yeah.
I always say that. I said, this is Alan 3.5. Yeah.
3.5. Now we've like 3.6. Here we go.
Yep.
Yeah. Before we hit record today, we were talking a little bit about kind of the transition between a passion project into the profit world, and making that jump without losing the spark and joy of the passion. And I know you work with a lot of individual coaching clients on this. So I wonder if you might offer some behind the scenes or little nuggets of delight or sparks of joy for people who may find it really intimidating to kind of cross that line from passion into profit?
So one of the mistakes that I made early on in my coaching, so I've been coaching now for 7 years. I started out as a fitness coach, then I was a peak performance coach. I did life coach for a very short time, mindset coach, and then I was a business consultant, and then I eventually landed on business coaching.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a hell of a road, and I'm talking. I have a 10,000 hour tracker, and I'm saying this just so you know I'm not just talking. I am coming up on 8,000 coaching, speaking, podcasting, and training. And so I've met all these people from all over the world. And quite frankly, I'm just going to be transparent. I've lost a lot of clients. And I have 24 now, and some of them come and go. And I don't have a long-term contract or anything like it's pay as you play. And so I've met hundreds of people deeply, one-on-one, hour-long sessions. And I've come to understand there's this huge bottleneck. Now, please keep in mind that I'm a business guy, and from my perspective, for those of you who do identify as creative, the artists, there's the scientist and the artist, and we all identify with one more than the other, even though we're all both. And so just bear with me. I'm going to talk as a scientist here.
Sure.
When people say, well, I don't really want my passion to feel like a job. Early on, I made the mistake of really helping them grow and scale it into a business, and then they would run away, kind of. And the reason why is because I basically am setting them up. They come to me and they tell me their goal. And then I reverse engineer what it's going to take on a day-to-day basis to hit that goal by X amount of time. Right.
Yeah.
And then they hate their life and their passion loses its passion. And then they leave. And eventually I caught wind that that's what was happening. So I had one client who said, I want to be like Bronnie Ware. And I said, okay, perfect. Okay, let's do it. Okay, here's what you have to do. And we have a system of success. It's a peak performance tracker where I had her tracking like 20 habits a day. And I have 22, Kevin does 20, and we have metrics. And I just basically bring metrics to the table. My coaching in a nutshell is this. Number one, set up the train tracks. Number two, improve the train tracks. Number three, stay on the train tracks. That's it. Okay. Now here's the thing. If you can't stand the train tracks sustain them, if you're unhappy, because most people are either results driven or experience driven. I'm results driven. So if we go to a coffee shop, you're going to get what you want. I'm going to get what has the right calories and caffeine. And that's result over everything for my brain. And for most people, they're very experience driven. They want to enjoy themselves. And I don't have whatever that is almost at all. And that's why I think artists and business owners are really good together if they can get along. So I'm going to speak as a business owner. This whole idea that you don't want your passion to feel like a job, I think is holding you back tremendously. And I think that it's better than whatever you're doing for your job. So for example, I have one client who I worked with recently. Her name is Kazia. She's an artist and she loves to draw and she's super creative and she identifies as super creative, but she doesn't want to put herself out there and put her art out there. And she doesn't want to sell it. And in my head, it's how can you, I would just say this is what my engineering brain says. You cannot monetize your passion unless you are willing to sell it. And I think that is the bottleneck for most artists. This is why actors and actresses have agents. This is why there's talent managers. This is why Taylor Swift has a financial advisor, because creatives tend to suck with love at making money. And people who are good at making money tend to suck at empathy and compassion and love and emotional intelligence. I want to be both. And I've tried really hard to be a 21st century leader where I'm ambidextrous, both professionally developed and personally developed. That's why one of the reasons I got a therapist. But for me as a numbers thinker, it makes no sense not to turn your passion into profit, because that's how you're going to really be fulfilled. And you're right. It's going to suck sometimes. I don't always want a podcast, and neither do you. And there's no planet where you're always going to want to. And I think that we need to wake up and stop kidding ourselves. But again, please don't hate me.
Well, thank you for breaking it down like that. And, Yeah, I think it is true. People who find themselves in the creative arts are about the experience, the feeling, the love, the passion, the spark, the joy. And bridging into the business world feels like a dampening of that experience and expression, because if you were to show up in your full glory as a performer into a business meeting, it may not go as well as you want it to.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, they
So
feel like opposites, but there's a way to integrate them. There is, you
yeah,
know.
I love
Yep.
that. That's what you work with people on and support them in. So I know your experience of creativity is shifting as we talk, but I'm
Mhm.
curious what your earliest memory of being creative is.
Oh man. I was one that just popped up is I had a little science kit and we thought that we created a me and my next door neighbor Chris, little kids, we thought we created a bug repellent that we were going to sell. And really, honestly, I'm a little ashamed of this. We pretty much just drowned an ant. There was an ant that
Sure.
drowned in our repellent, and we
Yeah.
thought we created the next bug repellent. We were going to sell it. And I also remember being around the kitchen table with one of my best friends growing up. It was my next door neighbor. His name was Kiki. His name is Keith, but we call him Kiki. And we were talking about starting a video game company. It was going to be called Lazcore. His last
Oh.
name is Corton. My last name is Lazaros. It was going to be Lazcore. And uh, the first game we were going to create was going to be Musket: The American Revolution, and it was going to be a half first person shooter, half third person shooter, sort of like the movie The Patriot, but more interactive.
Mhm.
And those kinds of things, I now realize too how weird some of that is, because when I was a kid, I genuinely had so much self belief that I now, in hindsight, realize is very statistically weird. I mean, all kids have like goals and dreams and stuff. Like, I want to be an
Yeah.
astronaut or I want to be a firefighter, that kind of thing. But for me, it was very different in hindsight. And after I've
Mm.
coached so many people, I've come to realize that because my two trajectories were I was going to be lawyer, politician, president. That was my
Mhm.
goal. Or it was going to be engineer, MBA, Fortune 50 CEO like my hero, Steve Jobs. And my whole life, I kind of wondered why most people would say things and then not do them.
Mhm.
And now I realize it comes down to low self belief.
Mm.
And so, one of the other things that I really want to call out here for
Mhm.
those of you who are heart driven creatives, you probably don't believe in yourself enough.
Mm.
And one of the reasons why is self belief is basically just certainty. And without math, I don't know how you guys do it, because math is where I get all my certainty. Because Kev was like, well, how did you know we'd have a successful podcast? And I said, math. You can't
Yeah.
do 1,750 episodes and not be successful if you're at least decent at oratory and speaking.
Sure.
And right, you can't add that much value and not eventually be successful. But now over time, I've come to realize if you took me out of the equation, I didn't have the business acumen and the business mind, we would be screwed. And he's even admitted he'd be screwed.
Mhm.
He's an artist. He's a great speaker, but he does not naturally know business.
Yeah.
He didn't create the infrastructure of NLU and the 21 person team and the departments and the website and all that stuff. So for the creatives out there, you might want to consider finding someone who is engineering or business minded, because
Mm.
when you pair up and can get along, that's the
Mhm.
hard part, getting along, because you
Sure.
think very differently.
Yeah.
You can really flourish. They can really unlock you, but that takes a lot of trust and that takes the willingness to get hurt.
Mm.
Um, but the self belief piece is super important. And those are some of the things that came up when you mentioned when I was a kid. I think as a kid, I was super, super ambitious. I mean, I was a
Yeah.
semi pro
Sounds like
gamer.
it.
Yeah, I was always shooting for the absolute moon. And it's not till you become an adult and you realize, oh, I was such a weirdo. Holy crap. Right?
Was it a weirdo or was it a super passionate kid that
Uh,
wanted to take their belief in themselves as far as it could go?
yeah, I mean weirdo in a good way. Yeah,
Okay.
weirdo in a good way. But
Perfect.
honestly, when you're statistically rare on the bell curve, you do have low self-worth.
Yeah,
And so that caused a lot of social challenges because self-belief
sure.
was like 10 out of 10. It was, yeah, whatever I want. within reason. Give me enough time and I'll be fine. Within reason. Again, I don't think anything you can do anything you set your mind to, mathematically inaccurate, but for the most part. But the self-worth piece that's social, when you're very statistically rare, the way you think, the way you are, you kind of realize it's not safe to be you, and then you kind of hide. And I think that's another reason why a lot of creatives don't put themselves out there, because your work is going to be judged and it's going to be criticized. Like, a lot of people are so afraid to be criticized that they don't take the chance to do the acting job or put your YouTube channel up or whatever it is. Your creative endeavors are going to be judged by the marketplace.
Sure.
Right. And when you don't sell, that's going to hurt your self-worth and your self-belief. And so you're trying to protect your self-worth and self-belief by not putting yourself out there. And unfortunately, if you don't put yourself out there, you can't really build self-worth and self-belief.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tricky. It's one of those double-edged swords trying to navigate. Well, this has been such a treat getting to chat with you. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
What does it feel like in my body to be creative? It feels like flow. It feels engaging, and it feels aligned, and it feels like time slips away. In this conversation, when I was the most aligned, time slipped away. And there's a lot of science underneath flow. And I think flow is the passion into purpose for an eventual profit, even if that profit is fulfillment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say it feels very flow, and time slips away and you're fully in it. You're fully engaged. It feels fully engaging. Yeah. That's
nice. Well, welcome to flow and podcasting. I love it. I love being a part of it. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. If people want to learn more about the things that you do, how could they go about doing that? Where can they find you?
So the website, thank you. So the website is nextleveluniverse.com, and everything is on there. It's with group coaching and one-on-one coaching, and we have a journal that you can use called the Dreamliner, and then we've got monthly meetups that are free. We've got a book club that's free every single week. We've been doing it for years. We got all kinds of cool stuff on there. And then you can also check out the podcast, Next Level University, 1% improvement, holistic self-improvement in your pocket from anywhere on the planet, completely free. Essentially, it's the mentor in your pocket every day that Kevin and I never had, because he didn't have a father, and neither did I growing up. Obviously, I had my stepdad, but not great. And so, yeah, we wanted to be a mentor in your pocket every day from anywhere on the planet, completely free. And so Next Level University and nextleveluniverse.com. The key is the podcast is Next Level University and the website is nextleveluniverse.com, because the person who has nextleveluniversity.com is charging way too much.
Fair. Well, I will put those specific links in our show notes so people have easy access. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
As have I. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And most importantly, I'm going to be reevaluating my identity around how might be the most creative. I'm kidding. I'm not the most creative.
I love it. Why not? Yes. Take it and run.
But fantastic. Yeah, that's my new 3.6 version. When I'm 36, I'll be like, I think I'm creative. Cool.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to see what happens for you with this new creative outlook. Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.